My son is not a subject for your cheap pity." That cold, sharp statement struck Anna harder than any blade. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a cruel rejection of all the affection she had poured into her time there. In the midst of the luxurious yet stifling room, she bowed her head, trying to hold back the sobs that threatened to spill over. The young woman didn't know that this very pain would be the beginning of a miraculous healing journey. A journey that would teach the powerful man standing before her that the most important sounds cannot be heard with the ears, but must be listened to with the heart. Anna took a deep breath, the cold morning air filling her lungs, carrying the scent of night dew and damp leaves. She tried to calm her racing heart as she stood before the colossal iron gates, intricately carved with winding vines. Behind it, the Thomas mansion loomed like a fairy tale castle, yet it exuded a sense of desolation and coldness rather than warmth. Each window pane was like a soulless eye, silently staring out at the perfectly, almost rigidly, manicured garden. The gate let out a heavy creak and slowly swung open, like a reluctant monster revealing its mouth. Anna stepped inside, feeling as if she had just crossed into another world, a world of unfamiliar wealth and invisible rules. Mrs. Grace, the housekeeper, was waiting on the steps. Her salt and pepper hair was perfectly coiled into a tight bun, not a single strand out of place. Her ash-gray uniform was impeccably straight, and her eyes, hidden behind thin-rimmed glasses, were as sharp as a razor blade. She scanned Anna from her simple ponytail to her slightly worn-out ballet flats, an undisguised look of assessment on her face. "You're Anna?" Mrs. Grace's voice was flat, devoid of welcome, a simple confirmation. "Yes, ma'am. Hello, my name is Anna Nguyen." Anna bowed politely, her hand involuntarily tightening on the strap of her canvas bag. "Follow me." Mrs. Grace said nothing more. Turning and walking inside, Anna hurried after her. The inside of the mansion was even more overwhelming than the outside. The marble floor was so polished she could see a faint reflection of herself. Huge oil paintings hung on the walls. Ancient ceramic vases sat on ebony shelves. Everything exuded luxury and expense. But the space was too vast, the ceilings too high, and the pervasive silence made it feel more like a museum than a home. The sound of her and Mrs. Grace's footsteps echoed down the corridor, sounding isolated and lost. "Your duties are clearly outlined in the contract," Mrs. Grace began to explain as they passed through a large living room with a set of pristine white velvet sofas. "Clean the rooms in the west wing, and assist in the kitchen when requested. And most importantly," she paused, turning to face Anna, her gaze becoming particularly stern, "you are to absolutely not disturb young Master Ethan. The boy needs absolute quiet. Everything he needs is already taken care of. You just need to do your job well and stay away from his room." The instruction was like a cold wall being built. Anna just nodded, a vague curiosity about the boy named Ethan stirring within her. Her first day of work passed in silence and solitude. She cleaned uninhabited rooms and polished items no one used. Late in the afternoon, as she was helping in the kitchen, Mrs. Grace suddenly walked in. "The head cook went home early today. Take this dinner up to young Master Ethan's room." She pointed to a silver tray with a small bowl of soup, a few slices of bread, and a glass of milk. "His room is at the end of the second-floor corridor, on the left. Place the tray on the table and leave immediately. Don't say a word." Anna's heart pounded. This was the first time she was allowed near the forbidden zone. She carefully carried the tray up the winding wooden staircase. The second-floor corridor was dimly lit, with only a few wall sconces casting a faint yellow glow. The door to Ethan's room was made of dark oak, looking heavy and isolated. She knocked softly twice. There was no reply. She knew there wouldn't be, but it was minimal courtesy. Pushing the door gently, she stepped inside. The room was huge, perhaps even bigger than her small rented apartment, with expensive furniture and a large window overlooking the back garden. But what caught Anna's attention was the boy sitting on the thick rug in the middle of the room. His soft brown hair almost completely covered his forehead. He was wearing a sea blue silk pajama set and was completely absorbed in a complex castle model made of thousands of tiny pieces. The boy was lost in his own world, an island of silence and creation. Anna tiptoed over, gently placing the tray on the small wooden table. She lingered for a second, admiring the boy's profile, his long, curled eyelashes. She felt a profound sense of loneliness emanating from his small back. Despite Mrs. Grace's warning, she couldn't just leave. "Hi," she whispered, trying to make her voice as gentle as possible. "My name is Anna." Ethan froze for a split second, but didn't look up. He only glanced at her fleetingly, a look of wariness and alienation, like a small animal disturbed in its territory. Then he turned back, continuing with his puzzle pieces as if she didn't exist. Anna felt a bit let down. She knew she shouldn't have expected more. She sighed, quietly turning to leave. Just then, a small incident occurred. The simple handmade bracelet on Anna's wrist, the only gift her deaf cousin had made for her, came unclasped. It fell onto the soft rug, making no sound, but rolled in small circles right next to Ethan's foot. The boy was startled by the unexpected movement in his line of sight. He looked up, this time directly at her. His gaze landed on the bracelet, then slowly moved up to meet Anna's eyes. There was a hint of curiosity, a bit of confusion flashing in his big, clear eyes. The boy gently crawled over, picked up the bracelet. Instead of giving it back immediately, he turned it over in his small palm, examining the simple wooden beads painted in alternating green and white. Anna held out her hand, smiling a warm and unguarded smile. "Thank you." Ethan looked at her smile, then into her eyes. It seemed he was reading something there. Then, slowly and deliberately, he used his hands to make two simple signs. First, a closed hand, placed lightly on his chin, and then moved forward. "Thank you." Anna froze. A warm current seemed to run through her entire body. But before she could react, the boy made another gesture. He used his thumb and index finger to form a perfect circle, the other three fingers held straight up, while nodding slightly. Beautiful. This time, Anna's heart skipped a beat. She not only recognized the signs, but she also felt the full, delicate emotion behind the gesture. The boy wasn't just being polite. He was complimenting her gift, communicating with her in the way he knew how. He was showing her a piece of his world. For a precious moment, the icy wall between them seemed to melt. A warm, genuine light sparkled in both their eyes, and a door had just opened, promising to chase away the silence and solitude that had reigned for so long in this room. That brief but meaningful encounter became a sweet secret between Anna and Ethan. It was like a tiny seed planted in dry, barren soil, silently blossoming in the mansion's silence. Anna no longer felt her work was monotonous and meaningless. Every day, she looked forward to the moment she could bring Ethan his meal, even if it was just for a few short minutes. Taking advantage of the times when no one was watching, when Mrs. Grace was busy downstairs, Anna began to build their own bridge of connection. She would sit on the floor, facing Ethan, and start with the simplest things. "My name is..." Anna slowly signed each letter, her fingers moving softly in the air. A-N-N-A. Ethan watched intently, his big, round eyes unblinking. He tilted his head, then smiled. A real smile, bright and pure, that lit up his entire face. That smile was like the first ray of sunshine after a long, cold winter. The boy pointed to his chest, then repeated the unique gesture from the other day, using his index finger to draw a small, sparkling star. It was his name sign, an imaginative sign that likely didn't exist in any sign language dictionary. Anna understood that this was a sign of trust. Ethan's world, once a secret garden, had now welcomed its first guest. The boy no longer just communicated through his castle puzzles. One day, he pulled on Anna's sleeve, led her to the space under his bed, and pulled out an old cardboard box. Inside was his greatest treasure, a stack of crayon drawings. Anna sat down beside him, carefully looking through each one. Her heart ached. There were colorful drawings of flowers and animals from fairy tales, but interspersed among them were drawings tinged with sadness. One was of a beautiful woman with long, flowing hair like clouds, smiling gently. Anna guessed it was his mother. The drawing was naive, yet it radiated boundless love. Then she came to the drawing that tore at her heart the most. A boy curled up inside a transparent glass box. Outside the box, a tall man in a sharp suit was walking away towards a skyscraper. At the man's feet was a long shadow, cast over the glass box. Anna looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with empathy. She didn't need to ask to understand the pain the boy carried. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder and signed, "Sad." "No." Ethan stared at the drawing, his small lips pressed together. He gave a slight nod. Then he looked up at Anna, his clear eyes suddenly distant. He signed back, a simple gesture that held a deep-seated emotion: lonely. Just that one word, spoken with his hands, was enough for Anna to understand everything. She understood that this wealth was just a glamorous glass cage, trapping a young soul that yearned for connection. She gently rubbed his back, a wordless gesture of comfort. Ethan's small changes, though happening in silence, did not escape Mrs. Grace's keen eyes. The boy no longer skipped meals. Sometimes she would hear the silent sound of his giggling from his room, and notably, on his windowsill, there was always a small glass jar with a few wild daisies or a fresh green leaf that Anna had picked from the garden. The housekeeper didn't understand what was happening. Ethan's positive change was a good thing, but it came from a maid from the provinces, someone she considered not of the same class. The unusual closeness between them made her uneasy, as if the order she had so carefully maintained for years was being disrupted. One afternoon, when she saw Anna coming out of Ethan's room with a smile on her face, Mrs. Grace stopped her in the corridor. "Remember your place, Anna." Her voice was cold, full of warning. "The young master is a sensitive child. Don't give him false hope. You won't be here forever, and I don't want to have to clean up the emotional mess you leave behind." Mrs. Grace's words were like a bucket of cold water. Anna was sad, but she knew she couldn't stop. The bridge she was building wasn't false hope. It was built with sincere understanding. The turning point in this secret relationship happened late one evening. Mr. Thomas's meeting was cancelled at the last minute, and he decided to come home earlier than planned. The house was as quiet as usual. On a whim, he decided to go into his son's room to say goodnight, a gesture he couldn't even remember the last time he'd made. He opened the door a crack, intending to just peek in for a moment and leave. But the scene inside froze the powerful man in his tracks. Anna and Ethan were sitting opposite each other on the floor, in the warm glow of the lamp. There was no sound, no TV, no music, just silence. But it was a living silence. Their hands were dancing in the air, creating a vibrant and expressive conversation. Ethan was excitedly telling her about his castle model, his eyes sparkling, his face beaming with a pure joy that he, the boy's father, had never witnessed. For a brief second, a warm feeling seeped into Mr. Thomas's icy heart, but immediately after, a more complex wave surged. It was surprise, envy, and a bitter sense of powerlessness. A simple maid, someone whose name he couldn't even remember, was able to enter his son's world, a world that he, with all his money and power, had been on the outside of for 8 years. The feeling of being a failed father, a stranger in his own home, was unbearable. Rage overwhelmed everything. He clenched his fist, veins popping on the back of his hand. He pushed the door open violently and stepped in. That silent, beautiful conversation had to end immediately. The sudden, forceful opening of the door made both Anna and Ethan jump. Their hand conversation, which had been so engrossing, abruptly stopped mid-sentence like a film being cut. The bright smile on Ethan's face vanished, replaced by a look of bewilderment and a hint of fear as he saw his father's angry face, a face he was all too familiar with from his vague memories. Mr. Thomas took long, heavy strides into the room. His eyes were not on Ethan, but were fixed on Anna like two icy drills. Who gave you permission to do this? His voice was deep and cold, each word a sharp shard of ice piercing the still air. Anna jumped to her feet, her legs trembling, her hands nervously intertwined. "Sir, I just," she stammered, trying to find a reasonable explanation, but her mind was a complete blank. "My son is not a subject for your cheap pity," he roared, the long simmering anger finally erupting. He wasn't just angry at Anna, he was angry at himself, angry at his own helplessness. Mrs. Grace, hearing the commotion, rushed upstairs and appeared at the door like a phantom. Seeing the scene, she immediately understood and quickly chimed in, her voice full of triumph. "I told you, sir. She just wants to use these little tricks to win the young master's affection, to stay here longer." "That's not true." Anna turned to her, her voice breaking with frustration. "I didn't mean that. I truly just wanted to be a friend to him." "A friend?" Mr. Thomas scoffed, a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. "I hired the best teachers, the top psychologists from all over the world. They all failed. Who do you think you are to befriend him?" He pointed a finger at Ethan, but his eyes never left Anna. "You're just a maid. Do your job. Or no." He stopped, his gaze turning cruel. "Starting tomorrow, you don't need to come back here." The final statement was like a death sentence, a powerful blow to both Anna and Ethan. Ethan, witnessing everything, understood the horrific meaning of those words, even without hearing the sound. His world collapsed. Anna, his first and only friend, the bridge connecting him to the outside world, was about to be taken away. He was in utter panic, running to her, clutching her sleeve with both hands, shaking his head frantically. Tears streamed down his innocent, clear face. He turned to his father, his small, trembling hands repeatedly signing in desperation. "Don't go, friend. Anna is my friend." He repeated the gesture over and over, pouring all his strength and fear into every movement. But Mr. Thomas didn't understand. Or maybe he deliberately chose not to. In his eyes at that moment, it was just a chaotic, meaningless mess of a child throwing a tantrum, which only heightened his frustration and sense of failure. Anna bowed her head, not daring to look into Ethan's tear-filled, pleading eyes. Her heart felt like it was being crushed. She could only whisper a choked apology, an apology the boy would never hear. "I'm sorry, Ethan." Then she gently, painfully, pried his small fingers from her arm, turned, and walked away like a fugitive. The door to the room slammed shut behind her, trapping all of Ethan's silent sobs inside. Inside the room, Ethan burst into tears, a silent, heaving cry that shook his small body. He retreated back into his world of silence, but this time, it was no longer a safe haven. It had become a dark and painful prison, more so than ever before. The only bridge connecting him to the light had been destroyed by the very father he loved. From that day on, the light seemed to have truly left the mansion. Ethan refused to eat and lost interest in his castle models. He collected all his drawings, put them back in the cardboard box, and pushed it deep under his bed. All day, he would just sit motionless in the chair by the window, his eyes vacant as he looked out at the garden, seeing nothing at all. The silence in the mansion was no longer a quiet stillness. It had become heavy, dense like a condemnation. It seeped into every corner of the rooms, weighing heavily on everyone's hearts, especially Mr. Thomas's. Every time he passed the corridor and saw his son's door tightly shut, he felt an endless pang of guilt, but the pride of a powerful man prevented him from admitting his mistake. In the days following Anna's departure, the Thomas mansion was shrouded in a heavy, suffocating silence. It was like the air before a great storm, still but full of unease. Mr. Thomas tried to fill the void with work, with meetings that lasted late into the night. But every time he returned home, facing his son's silent door, he felt a bitter sense of failure. The annual charity gala, an important event to burnish the Apex Corporation's name and social responsibility, was still held as planned. The back garden of the mansion was lavishly decorated with thousands of twinkling lights, white silk drapes, and fresh floral arrangements. The gentle music, the clinking of glasses, and the lively chatter created a luxurious scene, perfect down to every detail. Anna, despite being fired, received a call from Mrs. Grace. "We're severely understaffed in the kitchen. Can you come in to work extra hours for tonight?" The housekeeper's voice was still cold, but there was a hint of something that was almost pleading. Anna agreed immediately, not for the money, but for a faint hope that she might see Ethan, even from a distance. She worked in the kitchen area, amid the clatter of knives and the heat from the ovens. Her heart felt heavy. From here, she could hear Mr. Thomas's speech echoing from the main stage, his voice dignified and powerful, speaking of community commitments and the importance of connection. The words sounded so ironic. Meanwhile, upstairs, a small but fateful incident occurred. A new serving staff member, assigned to check on the rooms, entered Ethan's room. Seeing the large portrait of the beautiful woman on the wall was slightly askew, he kindly straightened it, but in doing so, he unintentionally moved it from the spot Ethan was used to. Just as the staff member left, Ethan came out of the bathroom. He stopped in his tracks immediately. Everything in the room was the same, except for one thing: his mother's portrait. It had been moved. For a normal person, it would just be a minor detail. But for Ethan, it was a world falling apart. That painting was the only image he had left of his mother, a sacred, inviolable keepsake. The sudden change, even just a few centimeters, triggered a deep-seated fear in him. Someone had touched his mother. She was about to disappear. A silent scream burst from the boy's chest. He bolted from the room, running down the stairs with a panic he had never experienced before. He charged straight into the middle of the formal gala, knocking over a tray of wine glasses. Every sound suddenly stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned towards the boy in his pajamas, with his messy hair and wide, terrified eyes. He tried to pull Mrs. Grace's hand, then the hands of other staff members, his small hands gesturing wildly towards the staircase, trying to express what had happened, but no one understood. They only saw a child causing a scene, embarrassing the host. They tried to pull the boy away, both coaxing and commanding him, to avoid disrupting the party. Anna, carrying a stack of clean plates, heard the commotion and the sound of breaking glass. She ran out and was frozen when she saw the scene. She saw the fear, the desperation, and the utter loneliness in Ethan's eyes as he was surrounded by adults who couldn't understand him. Without a moment's hesitation, she dropped the stack of plates onto the nearest table, ignoring the surprised glances, and rushed towards the boy. "Stop!" Her voice rang out, clear and decisive, making the staff members holding Ethan halt. She knelt down in front of the boy, her simple staff uniform a stark contrast to the surrounding splendor. She gently took his trembling hands, her gaze soft and reassuring like a lighthouse in a storm. She began to sign, slowly and clearly. "It's Anna. I'm here. Calm down. What's wrong, Ethan?" Seeing the familiar face, hearing the familiar voice from those hands, Ethan's panic found an anchor. He stopped struggling. He looked at Anna, tears streaming down his face. He began to tell the story, his gestures hurried and agitated, but Anna patiently followed, nodding to let him know she was listening. After Ethan had completely calmed down, Anna took a deep breath. She stood up, turning to face the silent ballroom. She looked straight at Mr. Thomas, who was standing stunned on the stage, his face pale with shock and embarrassment. Anna's voice was firm, every word echoing across the still space. "Sir," the boy said, "Mom's portrait was taken away." She paused for a beat, letting the sentence sink in. Then, she continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, fully conveying the boy's fear. "I'm afraid Mom will disappear again, just like Dad is about to disappear." The entire room was dead silent. The music had stopped. The wind rustled faintly through the tree leaves. Mr. Thomas stood motionless on the stage, stunned. He felt as if an invisible knife, laced with pain and regret, had been plunged directly into his heart. That sentence, translated from his son's silence, resonated more loudly than any thunder he had ever heard. It exposed all his callousness and distance, not just to Anna, but to hundreds of people. For the first time in his life, he truly heard the voice of the son he loved, and it was the most painful indictment he had ever faced. The party ended in awkward silence and hushed whispers, but Mr. Thomas no longer cared about any of that. His mind was filled with his son's words, conveyed through Anna. It was like a wake-up call, rousing him from a long sleep of indifference and pride. Right after the last guest left, amidst the wreckage of the party, he found Anna quietly helping to clean up in a corner of the garden. She looked up as he approached, a hint of anxiety in her eyes, not knowing what was about to happen. Mr. Thomas stood before her, the powerful man who always appeared dignified now looking completely different. His shoulders were slightly slumped, his face marked with fatigue and a profound sense of regret. He didn't say much, just handed her an envelope. Anna hesitated to open it. Inside wasn't a paycheck, but a carefully drafted contract. The title clearly read, Educational Companion Agreement for Ethan Thomas, with a generous salary and provisions to cover her tuition until she graduated. Anna looked up, her eyes wide with astonishment. Mr. Thomas cleared his throat, trying to hide his emotion. I was wrong, he said, his voice hoarse. I tried to use everything money, experts to fix my son, and I forgot that all he needed was understanding. He looked straight into Anna's eyes, a look that was sincere and almost pleading. Please stay, and please teach me how to listen to my son. Anna was speechless. She just nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it was a tear of happiness and relief. The journey of healing began that day. Every evening, after long, stressful hours at the corporation, the powerful CEO would return home, take off his luxurious suit jacket, and sit down on the floor in his son's room. He became a diligent student, patiently learning each sign from Anna. At first, his fingers, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, were stiff and clumsy. He often mixed up the gestures, but he was not discouraged. Ethan sat beside him, sometimes letting out silent giggles at his father's awkwardness, and then gently taking his hand, guiding it to form the correct sign. The room, which used to be cold and silent, was now filled with silent laughter and the warm light of connection. The first dinner he was able to converse with his son on his own was an unforgettable milestone. Without Anna to translate, he looked straight into Ethan's eyes and slowly, a little hesitantly, signed, Dad loves you. Ethan's eyes widened, unable to believe what he was seeing. He looked at his father, then at Anna standing in the corner of the room, smiling. An overwhelming emotion surged in his small chest. He launched himself into his father's arms, burying his head in his chest, and for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of complete safety and love from his father. In that moment, the icy wall that had existed for 8 years between the father and son completely melted, leaving no trace. Months later, a major event took place. Apex Dynamics, Mr. Thomas's corporation, held a press conference to announce the establishment of the Grace's Voice Foundation, named after his late wife. The foundation specialized in providing educational support, hearing aids, and free sign language classes for deaf children and their families nationwide. Anna, who had now graduated from university with honors, was appointed as the project director of the foundation. She stood on the stage next to a completely changed Mr. Thomas. His eyes no longer held that cold, distant look, but were warm and benevolent. The final, most emotional and meaningful turning point came. At the foundation's launch ceremony, Ethan, in a perfectly tailored little suit, confidently stepped up to the podium. He was no longer the timid, frightened boy of the past. He looked down at the packed auditorium, smiled brightly, and began to speak with his hands. Anna stood beside him, her voice clear and emotional, as she translated his heartfelt words for everyone to hear. Before, my world was only silence. I thought I would always be lonely in that world. The boy paused, looking toward Anna. But then, a friend came. She taught me that there are sounds you don't need ears to hear. You just need an open heart." The boy turned back to the audience, then looked at Anna with eyes full of infinite gratitude. "Thank you, Anna. You are the most beautiful sound in my world." The auditorium fell silent for a second, then erupted in a resounding, endless round of applause. Many people were moved to tears. Mr. Thomas walked over, standing next to his son. He looked at Anna, his eyes filled with silent gratitude. Then, he gently raised his hands and signed a phrase that only she and Ethan understood. "Thank you. You saved both of us." Anna smiled, a radiant and peaceful smile. She knew that the circle of kindness she had started with a small act, stemming from compassion, had now spread, creating a legacy that would echo on forever, not with sound, but with boundless love and understanding.